Hello friends. So today we find ourselves isolated and some of us left with the responsibility of educating our children from home for the first time. In some ways this is life as usual for me, as I've been homeschooling my kids for the last 4 years, but this is nothing like normal homeschooling, and it's not a normal homeschooling situation. In a normal homeschooling situation, you're with your kids every day and you know what they're working on and you know where they're at and you just keep moving along. But I know that during seasons when my kids were in public school that I wasn't able to track with them that way. And so that makes it a lot more difficult during this season. And also normally when my kids finish their work, they run outside and play. And they play with their friends. And that's motivation right there for them to get some things done. Or the teenagers, they'll congregate together at one of our houses and they'll chat, they'll fight, and then they'll work things out because they really care about each other and because everything is just so important at that age. But none of that can happen right now. There is nowhere to go. So maybe what we need to do right now more than educate our kids is just to take a moment and be with them, to see them and to listen to them, because we get so little time together. And maybe rather than trying to replicate some kind of educational experience that we feel like they should be getting because they're not getting it at school right now, we could just take a moment to reflect together about what we want for our kids. I know as a parent, it weighs on me that it's my responsibility to raise my children in the way that they should go. So today I thought maybe I would share a little bit about what we're doing at home, and maybe you'll decide to join us in it and we can raise our children together, even if just for a little while. Or maybe you will feel inspired to incorporate some new elements in your relationship and prioritize instilling in them something new that you just haven't had the chance to really focus on before. Or maybe you'll decide that this is so not for you. And that's so okay, because there are really a lot of wonderful, effective ways to raise our kids. And I want to affirm you as a parent that you can discern God's will and that you can know God's will for your family, and I bless you in that. So for the last 3 years, we as a family have been partnering with Classical Conversations in educating our children. And I've been tutoring at the challenge level, which is junior high school students, and there's so much that I love about the classical approach to education. So I'll share more about just what classical education is another time for those who are interested in that. But one reason that I love it is that it works with where our children are at in their cognitive development. It speaks to where their brains are, to what their brains are capable of, and opens up their ability to think clearly and carefully. And it facilitates their ability to communicate persuasively and beautifully. And I believe we're raising up a generation of spiritually faithful leaders who will impact the kingdom of God. And there's nothing that I want more for my kids than to nurture their love for God. So I know as a parent, this is not always easy. So first, just very quickly, I'm just going to talk about the 3 developmental stages that our kids have the potential to grow through if nurtured, that align with 3 stages of education. The first is the grammar stage, and this begins really at birth. In a way, it's even happening already before they're born, and it continues throughout the elementary years. Its main focus is input. Kids take in information like sponges. I'm sure you have observed this in your own kids. And they're fascinated with facts, and they love repetition and songs. And the focus of this time is to instill in them, or really simply feed into their natural wonder. We pay attention to their questions and follow their curiosity in a rich environment that provides them with the things that they need to learn about as well. As they begin about grade 3, if their wonder has been allowed to flourish, rather than be quashed by directing them down a too narrow path of prescribed learning, new capacities begin to just open up very naturally. This is just the beginnings of the dialectic stage, which is also sometimes called the logic stage. This stage is all about dialogue. It's asking great questions to dig in deeply into information. It can look like facilitating formal logic skills, and it can be guiding them as they learn to form strong arguments and recognize poor ones. They might engage in oral debates, and they begin to develop the skills of writing an essay. This stage will stretch through the early teenage years, the junior high years. And if you have a teenager, you might be quite familiar with how teenagers like to argue. How wonderful would it be for them to be able to argue well and to be able to look at the world around them and discern truth and validity, manipulation and falsehood. By the time they enter their high school years, where they're preparing for adulthood and peer pressures are continuing to mount, we want them to have well-developed skills in this area. That's something that I want for my kids. This third stage that they're entering into is called the rhetoric stage. Older teenagers, they naturally become more poetic, more romantic, and if their thinking skills have been cultivated, they're ready to express. This stage has the potential to be all about self-expression, writing poetry, teaching their peers, translating information into beautifully crafted, persuasive works. And I want you just to take a moment to consider this. Most educational approaches, from my observation anyways, leap from the grammar stage, the intake of information, to the rhetorical stage of self-expression and writing, which is more suited to high school students. Not that they're not doing those things at all, that all of these things are always going to be part of the learning process, but the question is what are we focusing on and what are we cultivating at what time? So many skip from the grammar stage of intake to the rhetorical stage of self-expression. And they skip entirely over the mediating stage of dialectic that teaches logic, clear thinking, how to evaluate information, and how to formulate coherent arguments. So moving from information to expression without being grounded in logic leaves them susceptible to any sweet-sounding argument, and it limits their expression and belief to an emotional level, rather than grounding emotion and expression in sound thought. And in truth. Today, many students still haven't learned these skills at the college level. I know I didn't have these skills when I got to college, and many of us adults find ourselves still lacking in confidence because we were never taught these things. So the classical approach to education fills this gap in our children's education, and I really love that. So maybe you want to partner together with us in raising our children together. Maybe you're thinking about how you might think differently about education. And as we're at home for this foreseeable future with these magnificent young human beings, let's take some time to reflect on what we want for them, what God has planned for them. And let's take time to listen to them and see what God has been building into them at this stage in their lives. Let's take some time to reflect on our role as parents and how we can be facilitating these types of growth in our kids. Bless you, bless your family, and stay well.